The binder hit the defense table with a thud that echoed like a gunshot in the silent courtroom. It was thick, black, and filled with lies. "Your Honor," the opposing counsel, Mr. Sterling, boomed. He was a man who wore suits that cost more than my first car and had a smile that looked like it was sharpened with a file. "We are looking at a clear case of financial negligence. My client, Mrs. Laura Bennett, has carried the weight of this family for 10 years. She is a successful realtor. She brings home the bacon. Meanwhile, Mr. Bennett." He gestured to me with a dismissive wave of his hand, as if I were a stain on the carpet. "Mr. Bennett plays in his workshop. He calls himself an artisan. We call him unemployed. He contributes nothing to the household but sawdust and noise." I sat perfectly still. My hands were rough, calloused from years of working with oak and mahogany. I wore my only suit, a charcoal gray one I'd bought for a funeral 3 years ago. It was clean, but compared to Sterling's Italian silk, it looked like a costume. Laura sat next to Sterling, refusing to look at me. She was typing on her phone under the table, probably texting her sister about how she was finally going to be free of the anchor. "We are requesting full alimony," Sterling continued, pacing in front of Judge Patterson. $5,000 a month. "We also want full possession of the marital home, the truck, and we demand he vacates the workshop on the property immediately. Laura needs that space for a home gym." Judge Patterson rubbed his temples. He was an older man, known for being tough but fair. He looked at me over his reading glasses. "Mr. Bennett," the judge said, his voice gravelly, "you haven't filed a counter motion. You don't even have a lawyer present. Are you representing yourself?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said. My voice was quiet, steady. I didn't see the need for a lawyer. Laura let out a sharp, cruel laugh. "Of course he didn't," she whispered loudly. "He can't afford one." Sterling smirked. "Exactly, Your Honor. This man claims poverty. He claims his custom furniture business breaks even. But we believe he is hiding cash. We believe he's been stashing money away in cash boxes, keeping it off the books to cheat my client out of her fair share." "I see," the judge said. He looked tired of the drama. "Mr. Bennett, the plaintiff is demanding a full disclosure of assets. They claim you are hiding wealth. Do you have a response?" "I do, Your Honor," I said. I reached into my battered canvas messenger bag. Laura rolled her eyes. She hated that bag. "It makes you look like a hobo, James," she used to say. I pulled out a single, thin folder. It wasn't black. It was a deep, rich blue, made of textured paper. "This is my asset list," I said, standing up and walking toward the bench. Sterling stepped in front of me, snatching the folder from my hand before I could reach the bailiff. "I'll take that. We need to verify the authenticity of these so-called assets before the judge wastes his time." Sterling opened the folder. He expected bank statements. He expected crumpled receipts from a hardware store. Instead, he pulled out a document printed on heavy, cream-colored bond paper with a gold seal at the bottom. Sterling squinted at it. He frowned. He flipped the page. Then he flipped another. His smug smile began to falter. What is this?" Sterling muttered. "This isn't a bank statement. This is deeds? Patents?" "It's the list you asked for," I said calmly. Sterling looked at Laura, confused. "Laura, did you know he owns a patent for biosynthetic lumber?" Laura looked up, confused. "What?" "No. He makes chairs, Henry. Just wooden chairs." "Give me that," Judge Patterson said, extending his hand. Sterling handed the folder up to the bench, looking rattled. "Your Honor, I object to this last-minute evidence. It's clearly a fabrication. There is no way a man who drives a 2012 Ford F-150 owns these kinds of holdings." The judge opened the folder. The room went silent. I watched Judge Patterson's face. I saw his eyes widen. I saw him lean forward, his posture shifting from bored authority to intense focus. He read the first page. Then he looked at me. Then he read the second page. He stopped on the third page. His hand trembled slightly. "Mr. Bennett," the judge said softly. "Item number 4 on this list." "Yes, Your Honor." "The Serenity Gardens complex on the west side," the judge said, his voice catching slightly. You are the owner?" "I am the sole proprietor, yes," I answered. "I built the furniture for the lobby myself." Laura stood up, angry. "Serenity Gardens? That's the new hospice center. The one that costs millions." "He's lying, Your Honor. He probably just fixed a door there once." "Sit down, Mrs. Bennett," the judge snapped, with a ferocity that made Laura jump. The judge looked back at me. His expression had changed completely. It wasn't just respect. It was awe. "Mr. Bennett," the judge said, taking off his glasses. "My mother spent her last days at Serenity Gardens. The care she received, the anonymity of the donor who funded the palliative wing, the staff told us it was a quiet carpenter who wanted to give back." The judge stood up. He actually stood up behind the bench. The bailiff looked confused. Sterling looked terrified. "I have been looking for the name of the man who allowed my mother to pass in peace for 2 years, the judge said, his voice thick with emotion. "And you're telling me he's been standing in my courtroom, being called a deadbeat?" Laura looked at Sterling. "Henry, do something. Why is he talking about hospitals?" Sterling was flipping through his notes, sweating. I don't know, Laura. This isn't in the discovery files." I looked at Laura. "You never asked what I did in the workshop, Laura. You only asked when I would be done making noise." The judge sat back down, but he didn't pick up his gavel. He picked up the asset list again. "Mr. Sterling," the judge said, his voice icy cold. "You demanded a full disclosure of assets. Well, you have it. And I am looking at a net worth that makes your law firm look like a lemonade stand." The judge turned the page. "But there is something else here," the judge said. "Item number 10. The mortgage on the Bennett marital home." "Yes," Sterling said, trying to regain ground. "We want the house." "You can't have the house," the judge said. "Why not?" Laura screeched. "I paid the mortgage." "No, Mrs. Bennett," the judge said, holding up a document. "According to this, the mortgage was bought out 3 years ago by a holding company called Oak and Iron LLC. The judge looked at me. "Which is wholly owned by Mr. Bennett." "He owns the house?" Laura whispered, her face going pale. "He owns the house," the judge confirmed. "He owns the block." "And Mr. Sterling?" The judge smiled, a dangerous, predatory smile. "According to item 11, he also owns the building your law firm leases its office space from." The silence in the courtroom was shattered by the sound of Sterling dropping his expensive fountain pen. It clattered against the floor, rolling under the defense table. He didn't bend down to pick it up. He was too busy staring at the judge, his face rapidly losing its tan. He owns my building?" Sterling stammered. "The plaza on 4th? According to this deed," Judge Patterson said, tapping the paper with a rhythmic thump, "Oak and Iron LLC purchased the property 18 months ago. You are currently in month 4 of a 5-year lease. And I see here there is a moral turpitude clause in your rental agreement that allows the landlord to evict tenants who engage in unethical litigation." The judge looked over his glasses. "I'd say suing your own landlord for assets he already owns qualifies, wouldn't you, Mr. Sterling?" Laura grabbed Sterling's arm, shaking him violently. She didn't care about his office. She cared about the numbers she had just heard. "Henry! Forget the building!" She hissed, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. "Did you hear the judge? Millions. He has millions. And we're still married. She turned to me, her eyes wide with a terrifying mix of shock and hunger. The disgust she had shown 5 minutes ago was gone, replaced by a desperate, fawning smile. James, she breathed. Why didn't you tell me? We could have moved out of that small house. We could have traveled. I only pushed you because I wanted us to be successful. You didn't want us to be successful, Laura, I said, my voice calm. You wanted you to be carried. You called my work trash. You threw away my sketches. I was stressed. She cried, playing the victim card instantly. Your Honor, I am his wife. Under the law, I am entitled to half of everything acquired during the marriage. If he built this empire while I was cooking his dinner, then half of that empire is mine. We are amending our claim. We want 50% of Oak and Iron LLC. Sterling woke up from his shock. The greed overrode his fear. Yes, Your Honor. Marital property. It doesn't matter if he hid it. In fact, because he hid it, she might be entitled to more than half. Judge Patterson looked at me. He didn't look worried. He looked curious. Mr. Bennett, the judge said. They make a valid point. Unless there is a prenuptial agreement, these assets are vulnerable. There is no prenup, Sterling shouted triumphantly. We checked. He was broke when they met. That's true, I said. I didn't have a dime when we met. But I did have a postnuptial agreement. Laura froze. A what? I never signed anything. You did, I said. 3 years ago. Remember when I incorporated the workshop? I needed you to sign a spousal waiver so the bank wouldn't put a lien on your salary if the business failed. I watched the memory hit her. It was a Tuesday night. She was watching reality TV, drinking wine. I had brought the papers to her, explaining that I was trying to protect her credit score from my risky hobby. Just give it here, James, she had sighed, annoyed that I was interrupting her show. I don't care about your little woodshop. Just keep my name off your debt. She had signed 3 copies without reading a single word. I have the document here, Your Honor, I said, pulling another sheet from the blue folder. The bailiff handed it to the judge. Let's see, Judge Patterson read aloud. Spousal waiver of interest. The undersigned, Laura Bennett, acknowledges that the entity Oak and Iron LLC is the sole and separate property of James Bennett. She hereby waives any and all future claims to assets, equity, or revenue generated by said entity in exchange for. The judge paused, squinting at the fine print. Then he chuckled. In exchange for total immunity from any business debts. Laura's face went from pale to a sickly shade of gray. It was a trick. She screamed. He tricked me. He told me it was to protect me. It did protect you, Laura, I said. For 3 years, you didn't pay a dime into the business. You didn't buy a single nail. You didn't sand a single board. You kept your salary. You bought your shoes. You went on trips with your friends. You got exactly what you wanted, 0 risk. I took a step closer to the railing. But 0 risk means 0 reward. Sterling looked at the document in the judge's hand. He knew it was ironclad. He knew he had just lost the biggest payday of his career. But he had 1 card left. Your Honor, Sterling said, his voice weak. Even with a waiver, spousal support is based on lifestyle and income disparity. He is a multimillionaire. She is a realtor making $60,000 a year. He has a moral obligation to support her. Moral obligation? Judge Patterson asked, raising an eyebrow. Mr. Bennett, do you have any response to the alimony request? I do, Your Honor, I said. I would be happy to pay alimony. If the marriage had ended due to irreconcilable differences. I reached into the folder for the final time. But it didn't end because we drifted apart. It ended because Laura found someone she thought was a better investment. Laura stopped breathing. She stared at the folder in my hand as if it contained a bomb. I have here, I continued, a series of photographs taken by a private investigator last month. They show my wife entering the penthouse suite of the Grand Hotel with a man named Greg Turson. Sterling closed his eyes. He knew Greg Turson. Everyone knew Greg Turson. He was a crypto king who drove a leased Lamborghini and had just filed for bankruptcy last week. "Laura," Sterling whispered. "You didn't." "He told me he was rich." Laura blurted out, incriminating herself instantly. "He said he had millions in Bitcoin. He treated me like a queen." "And that's the irony, isn't it?" I asked her. "You left a quiet millionaire for a loud pauper. Greg Turson is being evicted from that penthouse tomorrow. I know this because..." I paused for effect. "Because Oak and Iron LLC owns the Grand Hotel, too." The judge let out a sound that was half laugh, half gasp. He covered his mouth with his hand to maintain decorum, but his eyes were dancing with amusement. "Mr. Bennett," the judge said, struggling to keep his voice steady. "Are you telling me that Mrs. Bennett was cheating on you, with a broke man, in a hotel that you own?" "Yes, Your Honor. And since adultery is a bar to alimony in this state..." I gestured to the empty defense table. "I believe the math works out to 0. Laura slumped into her chair. She looked small. Defeated. The enormity of her mistake was crushing her in real time. She had held the winning ticket, crumpled it up, and set it on fire because she didn't like the font. Judge Patterson set the papers down. He interlaced his fingers and looked at Sterling. "Mr. Sterling," the judge said, "I am going to make a ruling. And after that, I suggest you go back to your office, while you still have one, and read your lease agreement very carefully." Judge Patterson didn't even look at the mountain of files Sterling had brought. He looked only at the single blue folder in front of him. "Mrs. Bennett," the judge began, his voice devoid of pity. "You came into my courtroom demanding equity. You demanded fairness. Well, equity is a double-edged sword." He picked up the postnuptial agreement. "You signed away your rights to Oak and Iron LLC because you believed it had no value. That was a gamble. You lost. The law does not reward sellers' remorse." He dropped the paper. It floated down like a feather, landing on the desk with a finality that made Laura flinch. "As for alimony," the judge continued, turning to the photos of the hotel. "Adultery is a breach of the marital contract. You broke the vow. You forfeit the support. It is the ruling of this court that James Bennett owes you exactly nothing." "But, the house!" Laura cried, desperate tears streaming down her face. "Where will I live? You can't put me on the street." "The marital home is property of the LLC," the judge said. "Mr. Bennett, as the landlord, what is your intention regarding the tenant?" I stood up. I looked at Laura. I remembered the way she used to look at me when I came home covered in sawdust, like I was dirt. "She has 30 days to vacate," I said quietly. "I'm donating the house to the Safe Harbor charity. It will be used as a shelter for families who actually appreciate a roof over their heads." Laura sobbed into her hands. It was an ugly sound. The sound of a reality check bouncing. "And Mr. Sterling," the judge said, turning his gaze to the lawyer. Sterling jumped. Yes. Yes, Your Honor. I believe Mr. Bennett has something for you." I reached into my bag one last time. I pulled out a standard white envelope. I walked over to the defense table. Sterling recoiled as if I were handing him a grenade. "What is this?" He whispered. "Notice of non-renewal," I said. "You breached the conduct clause of your lease. You have until the end of the month to move your firm out of the plaza." Sterling stared at the envelope. But the renovations. I just put in marble floors. That cost me a fortune." "Consider it a donation to the next tenant," I said. "I'm sure the food bank that's moving in will love the marble." Sterling slumped back in his chair, defeated. He had lost his biggest case, his office, and his dignity in under 20 minutes. Judge Patterson picked up his gavel. "Case dismissed," he declared. The sound rang out, crisp and clean. I turned to leave. Laura grabbed the edge of my jacket. Her grip was weak, trembling. "James," she choked out. "James, wait. Please. The crypto guy. Greg, he lied to me. I was foolish. But I can change. We can start over. You need someone to help you manage all this wealth. I can learn. I can be the wife you deserve." I looked down at her hand on my sleeve. "You're right, Laura," I said softly. "You could learn." Her eyes lit up with a spark of hope. Yes, I can. But I don't need a manager," I said, gently peeling her fingers off my jacket. "I'm an artisan. I build things that last." "And us?" I dusted off my sleeve where she had touched me. "We were made of particle board. One little storm, and we fell apart." I walked away. I didn't look back at the sobbing woman or the ruined lawyer. I walked toward the heavy oak doors of the courtroom. As I pushed them open, Judge Patterson called out one last time. "Mr. Bennett?" I paused and looked back. The judge was standing, gathering his robes. "The new wing at the hospice," the judge said, a small, genuine smile on his face. "It opens next week. Will you be there for the ribbon cutting?" "No, Your Honor," I said. "I prefer to stay in the workshop. I'm working on a cradle for my niece." The judge nodded slowly. A salute from one quiet man to another. "Godspeed, Mr. Bennett." The smell of fresh cedar filled the air. It was the best smell in the world. I ran my hand along the smooth grain of the rocking chair I had just finished. It was perfect. Simple, sturdy, beautiful. My workshop door was open, letting in the cool autumn breeze. I walked out onto the porch of my new cabin. It wasn't a mansion. It was a log home on 40 acres of lakefront property, miles away from the city noise. I took a sip of coffee from my old, chipped mug. My phone buzzed on the railing. I usually kept it off, but I was expecting a delivery of walnut lumber. I glanced at the screen. It wasn't a lumber yard. It was a news alert from the local business journal. Legal Eagle grounded, Henry Sterling disbarred for ethics violations. Apparently, trying to sue your own landlord while hiding your client's affair didn't sit well with the Bar Association. I scrolled down. There was a small side article. Crypto King arrested for fraud. And listed in the article as a co-conspirator and unknowing accomplice was a woman named Laura Bennett. She wasn't charged, but she had lost everything in the investigation. The article said she was currently working as a hostess at a diner on the outskirts of town. I put the phone down. I looked out at the lake. The water was calm, reflecting the trees like a mirror. A black SUV pulled up the long gravel driveway. A woman stepped out. It was Sarah, the director of the Serenity Gardens Hospice. She was holding a large basket. "James!" she called out, waving. "I know you said no gifts, but the families insisted. Homemade jam and fresh bread." I smiled and walked down the steps to meet her. "You can't say no to fresh bread," I said. "They wanted to know your name," Sarah said, handing me the basket. "They wanted to put a plaque on the wall. The Bennett Wing." I shook my head. "No plaques, Sarah. Just tell them." I looked back at my workshop, where the tools lay waiting, where the sawdust covered the floor, where I was truly happy. "Just tell them it was built by a carpenter who had some spare wood." Sarah smiled. "A lot of spare wood. Enough to build a life," I said. We walked toward the house, the sound of laughter replacing the memory of the gavel. The empire was safe. The noise was gone. And the silence? It was worth every penny.